You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. All right, looking forward to this one today. From out west, from the Pac-12, Pat Chun from Washington State. How are you doing, man?
Good, Mike. Thanks for doing this, and I appreciate you providing a good resource for a lot of us in this industry, including myself. So I appreciate you reaching out.
Well, it's been fun to do these, and we've had some great response. And so, Pat, it's interesting of the number that I've done so far. It probably would not surprise you that certainly there's some common messaging, but candidly, man, there are a lot of different ways to view this world and to apply the processes to being successful in college athletics. So I do hope that it's helpful to folks in the industry, and we'll see that along the way. And I know you'll provide some good insight today too. So thanks again for joining. I'm going to jump right in if that's okay.
That's good.
Cool. So, one of the things that I've been interested to hear some response on, and you're the first Pac-12 AD I've had on here since we've relaunched. And, you guys have recently had a change in commissioner. And, the feedback you always get when you talk about commissioners is, what are they doing in a macro sense, the engagement of the CEOs. But as an athletic director, obviously, you want to make sure that you've got your level of engagement with the commissioner as well. And so I'm interested to just hear in your chair as an athletic director, what your engagement with George has looked like so far and what you see from him early on here as he's taken over this new role.
Well, George has gone with the full immersion into our league strategy, which has been very helpful. I think by this point, if he would have started in mid-July, he's either visited most, if not all, the campuses, including ours. On top of that, he's just a very communicative person, and he's coming from a point where he's very curious about our industry, doesn't come in with any preconceived notions, is really anxious to learn, and really, when he says listening tour, he means that sincerely because he's a high intellect person, but has high emotional intelligence as well. And I think that's what we're seeing George and why he's been so effective so early during his time as a commissioner, because he's just that unique blend in a leader that is high emotional intelligence and high intellect. And he's a really nice, genuine human being. And he understands what's at stake for all 12 of the schools in the Pac-12. And he understands also, and all 12 leagues all 12 schools in the league and George all understand we got to be unified to be able to move this forward. Because as you know, this industry is only getting more complex. It has survived. For those who don't know, I just saw Mike in DC at Lead One meetings, and he gave a nice little pep talk to all us ADs and talked about how the industry, where it used to be, where it is today, and where it's headed. But the industry has always survived and thrived really and grown because of just the transformation of leaders year to year within this athletic director seat. So I appreciated those words the other night. I was one who always likes a good pep talk, Mike. But we're in a unique time, and I'm one who believes, like many in our conference, George is the right person to lead our conference, especially during this segment or this period of history in college athletics.
Yeah, and applaud George for his tour of campuses. I think that's spot on, right? Coming from outside of college athletics, it's good to kind of get out and see what it looks and feels like, because you guys have 12 very different cities and universities and campuses and locales, et cetera. And so I think it's important to see, the campuses. Pat, the commissioner ultimately serves at the will of the CEOs of the league, right? But I'm going to dive in just a little bit deeper here. As an athletic director, what do you want in terms of your cadence with the commissioner? Let's say after you get through this first period, right? The educational period, the introductory period. What do you hope for in that regard?
Well, it's interesting because I'm sure we're like many leagues. The cadence of interaction with our conference has changed substantially since the beginning of the pandemic. Although we took a break for a good probably 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime, we have standing Wednesday meetings. And back in the old days, you'd get athletic directors together maybe once a semester, and then maybe some summertime if everyone was at NACTA or something like that. But now we're still meeting. We meet weekly. I think it's more of a indicator of all of the complexities going on in college athletics. So I think the good thing now, I think we all understand, I think we always have known this is an adapt or die type of industry from a leadership standpoint. So we're in a mode now where the adaptation is, clear lines of communication, a lot of candor. We're like many leagues where all the ADs work really well together. We're very collegial. Obviously, we're all competitive and all have responsibilities to our student athletes on our respective campuses, but we also understand the macro issues that we have to all get on the same page with. So the interaction is always, to me, is where it is based on the point in history we're at. And, George has jumped right in and he's fitting right away. I will tell you this, it's like, even when he got announced, when you talk about interaction, we all requested a meeting with him face to face even before his first day in the office. So, and to George's credit, he jumped right on it, was really excited. We ended up going to Las Vegas where his offices were at and actually got a tour of Allegiant Stadium and really just got to sit down and have, some candor with him about the things that we all needed to get on the same page with, things that were a priority to us, things that we know we needed to improve on as athletic directors, and things we needed help from the conference or the conference office with. And then fortuitous for us, we met at our media days in person, and it was really on the heels of the announcement of Oklahoma and Texas. And in hindsight, it was really good for us to all be able to be in the room. Just hey, as the plates started to shift in college athletics, at least we could all talk and say, all right, this is kind of the priorities for the Pac-12, and let's make sure we stay unified because that's going to be our greatest strength, and we'll go forward. So the interaction has been really strong. We're still meeting weekly via Zoom, and I don't know how long that'll last, but it may be the new world order when it comes to interaction with conferences.
Yeah. Well, that's very encouraging, and I'm going to riff off that for just a second because I don't think I shared in advance that I might talk about this, but you remind me just to ask this question. I'm intrigued with all the realignment news and so forth, and I'm not gonna like pin you down on that or anything. I'm most interested in your response to, there still seems to be some mystery around the alliance terminology, right? And I think a lot of that's because it hasn't been resolved as exactly what it means just yet. But maybe share a little bit of your thoughts there. The concept and where you see that headed as it plays out.
Well, I think, and the goal was really, I think there were a multitude of goals with the three conferences uniting and forming this quote unquote alliance. I think the first piece, which we saw at least from a Power 5 level, was we all understood that this was probably an important point for all of us to make sure that we did something to ensure stability amongst the Power 5. Now, you can see what's going on. The G5 is feeling the impact of that right now with potential school movement at the G5 level. But at the Power 5 level, the three conferences having really candid conversations, the commissioners having conversations, obviously with the respective schools and their leagues, and then going down this path to say, all right, are there things we can do together as three conferences that we understand that one, we believe that in terms of basic core values, principles, we align very well with, and just thinking about opportunities for student athletes for all sports across all, across this country to, from across all the time zones. Could you create some things? So we do have a lot of work to do, but it was, the announcement was more about, hey, we're committed to working together to try to create opportunities for all of our student athletes across all of their sports. I know football is the most complex and will be the most viewed upon or the most judged upon, but it was never going to be an easy process. I think we all had to just come to agreement that we're all three leagues were going to put in the work to try to make something happen. So more to come down the road. I know it doesn't feel tangible right now, but the reality is you got three conferences that have kept communication lines open, that have working groups put together, that are really going through a process of trying to figure out how to create these opportunities with these institutions and these three conferences that bring a pretty unique makeup when it's all said and done.
Well, with the upcoming NCAA Constitution Committee's work and broadcast contracts as they play out over the next few years, I think it's important to put some stakes in the ground as to sort of the alignment is the critical piece that I hear you talking about. And I think that's what matters as we explore what this area is going to look like. there can be turmoil over the next few months without a doubt. As I said the other night in my conversation with you, I mean, there's always been turmoil at some level. It just seems like there's more right now. But finding alignment with like-minded institutions is going to be critical in the middle of that process.
Yeah, and everybody, I mean, we're all, no matter what, I mean, especially at the FBS level, I know we're all the institutions want to do more and what's best for our student athletes. And that's ultimately the tie that binds us. And as we go forward, because of all the complexities, because we're still in a pandemic and you're dealing with NIL and Alston and the deregulation of transfers, I mean, there is a lot going on in college athletics, and this Constitution review does provide an opportunity for us to take a different look of how we're structured as a governing body in terms of the NCAA. So, change is coming, but you could argue, and you've been in this industry longer than me, change has always been a part of this. And we self-admittedly, we've never as an industry done a great job of being ahead of the change. We've reacted to change. So hopefully this Constitution review is an opportunity to kind of set the tone and the tenor and the direction of where change is headed.
Yeah. Well, so we both know that critical piece of that is presidential engagement. And you have been on record as saying that you think Kirk is one of the best presidents you could work for as an athletic director. Now, part of that is it's never bad to pump your boss up in the press, right? But I do know, having engaged with Kirk just a little bit when John Currie was at Kansas State, what kind of president he is. And so I thought you might, I think that's an important statement, the kind of president that an athletic director wants to work with. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's really how, Kirk is an engineer by background. So, and he's process driven. And I don't know how many people know this, but I know he's talked about it publicly. But when he was, I think, VP of research at Mississippi State, he pulled aside the ADs and the senior associate ADs. I think it may have been Larry Templeton at the time, and some kid named Greg Byrne and some kid named Scott Strickland, and picked their brains about what does it take, in their opinions, to have a very effective president relative to managing an athletic department. So this is something that Kirk has studied, and then obviously he hires John Currie to be his first AD at Kansas State, and you see all the successes and the transformative change that those two oversaw at Kansas State, and then fortunately, I mean, Kirk's reputation preceded him when I got here, and then you just when you work for him, you come to learn quickly all the great skill sets of leadership. He's an extraordinary listener. He is very he is process driven, but always problem solving mode. So there's never a 5-alarm fire with him, and he partners with everything. But I'd probably also say probably the thing that maybe unifies me and him the most, and probably when I see the way John Currie is as well, and what made them so effective, Kansas State, is none of us are motivated by credit. And then I think that's probably the thing that I really respect about Kirk, and we probably get in a fight. The only thing we fight about is he tries to throw too much credit at me publicly, so I'll try to throw it back at him publicly. But when you have people in critical roles, from leadership roles specifically, and you know this, Mike, and they're the last thing they even think about, care about, worry about, or even bothered by is that word credit. Man, you can do some really extraordinary things across the campus, and in our case at Washington State, across the system, because you're just trying to do good for your students and your faculty and your staff and your coaches. And that's what we have right now at Washington State. We have a president of our Washington State system who's just really focused on trying to make this institution a better place and impact students, and probably doesn't think 1 second of his year about who gets all the credit for it, because the students end up winning when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Yeah, so we talked about the institutional alignment in the context of the alliance. You hit on another alignment conversation, right? I mean, being aligned with your president is so critical to success. And look, you can do a case study. We could all do case studies to see where things have gotten off kilter at different universities in athletic programs or otherwise, and almost always it's related to alignment. And so having that is a gift, to be certain. I want to shift back career-wise just for a second, and we'll tie it back into your current job. So you're a native of Ohio. You went to Ohio State. And you worked 15 years at Ohio State with Gene and the folks there, and your pathway, if you will, was development. And when you become an athletic director, you are having to push buttons on so many different fronts, and there are differing agendas, and candidly, I think you become more of a generalist. You have to become more of a generalist than a specialist, but yet we both know that in order to achieve strategy and vision, you better be able to provide the resources to accomplish that. So for Pat Chun specifically, how do you engage with development today as an athletic director, personally with donors, but also how do you help your development and external relations teams set strategy for that?
So structurally, and you know this firsthand because I think your track record of hiring, and I'm friends with a lot of the ADs that you've once hired at different roles at other institutions, is the key. So for me, first and foremost, and our our model is not just unique to us, but we separate the fundraising and external pieces out in two separate things. Probably more because my background are those, and I just and we were so far behind in both areas. I know when Kirk was very public in saying Washington State doesn't have an expenditure issue. We spend least, we stretch the dollar farther than any school in the country. We're the most fiscally efficient athletic department in the Power Five. The challenge for us was revenue generation. So I needed to bring in some professionals here that could build teams, put systems in place. I brought a young man from Ohio State named Mitch Straub. Mitch was the highest performing fundraiser at Ohio State when he left. But like a lot of young professionals in our business, he knew he needed an opportunity to lead a staff because it's one thing to be able to fundraise, but it's also another thing to be able to lead others to fundraise. On our external side, we took Chris Park from UTEP. I see someone I got to know really well when I was in Conference USA. Spent time as interim AD there, and just a wonderful person as well. So what first and foremost, you got to hire really good people that you're aligned in terms of values. We check those boxes, and then ultimately let them, we'll meet and set strategy, but let them actually, go put things into motion. We're proud, like Chris led us through a process where during the pandemic, we signed a 10-year, $12 million field naming agreement with Gisa Credit Union. If we would have videoed it, you'd have seen, I think a dozen masked people, including our president, meeting on campus, walking through potential signage or activation opportunities, and sitting down in mass, having hard talks about what this thing could be and what we hoped it to be. And from a fundraising standpoint, if we average 12 to 13 million a year in total fundraising prior to my arrival, 2 years ago, we set a record with 25 million. During the pandemic, we did 30 million. Now, the interesting thing is this, and from a fundraising standpoint, because I would argue Mitch is the best fundraiser in the country. I think the numbers show it. He's done it at two very different institutions because we're aligned so philosophically on the same page, because the system he operates from is really what Gene and really Sheila Smith created at Ohio State. So I honestly today spend the least time in strategy with Mitch and his team, but the most time in spending time with our donors. And I think the best part is this, and you know this because your background's on the revenue side, fundraising side, as well as some of the best parts of your job is still spending time with your supporters because they care. And Washington State's a pretty unique place because we have a really vast majority of our population just care about Washington State. And really never ask, what can you do for me? It's just say, what can we do for Washington State? And I think that's why we've been able to have so much success in the fundraising piece. So I honestly, from a strategy standpoint, I probably spend the least amount of time with Mitch because I trust him. I know what he's doing. The numbers are incredible. What our team's putting up, it's more than double than we used to do. And but I'll spend as much time on the road as possible. But time and circumstance changes. I'm sitting on a lot of different committees now. This Constitution Committee is very time consuming that I'm on. I'm our Pac-12 rep on that, and the Pac-12 rep on D1 Council. So those have become very time consuming. So, but it's why you have wonderful people, wonderful coaches, a lot of people that do their jobs at high levels. And this firsthand, this whole entity, athletic department, leadership, being athletic director, it's too big for one person to do. And you're only going to be as good as your team, and you're only going to be as good as the people you hire. And fortunately for me, we have a team filled with extraordinary people that really do some extraordinary things for Washington State.
Yeah. When you dovetail relationship building, vision, strategy, passion, interest, with a critical ask, there's a lot of magic that can be created,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And so kudos to you and your team there. You mentioned in your comments just now about, I may not have the exact terminology, but I'm going to be close, that you're the most cost-effective athletic program in the
Fiscally
country.
efficient is what we like to say.
There you go. Okay. All right. So I want to make sure I say it the right way. And that actually was one of my questions is how do you do more with less, but at the same time, hold everyone accountable to championship standards?
So I think it's two things. One, goes back to the people that are on your team. The one resource that really has no ceiling is the power of people. So my background, it's clear as day you win with people, and that is a time tested term. The second piece is I am a planner. I am someone that needs to set out what goals are. One of the first things I told our team here is, hey, there's some rules of engagement that we'll have, as I get to learn Washington State, but we will operate out of a strategic plan. So one of our other deputy athletic directors, Brian Blair, he has led us immaculately through a strategic planning process. We just completed year 3, and the wonderful thing. So when you talk about how do you do more with less? It's really us going through the exercise, and we're like a lot of athletic departments, especially coming out of the pandemic. We are very different from a personnel standpoint post-pandemic, and a lot of people that started that were working here when we drafted the strategic plan are no longer with us because in leadership and AD changes, there's people come and go, and that's just part of the deal. So for us, it was just making sure we continually hire the right people. But we've been operating out of the strategic plan, and we've kept it a living document. We've even in the pandemic, Brian led us through a virtual review of where we were at. We're always updating our goals. It's a very public endeavor that we do. Our president's involved with it. Our provost is involved with it. We have deans and VPs involved with it. So that to me is where at least where I'm most comfortable operating out of. But I think it has really set us on a path that, all right, these are our goals. And it was, I think, even nice. One of the other benefits going into the pandemic, it was great to have a plan. But coming out of the pandemic, it was even better to be able to say, all right, before all this thing was kind of scrubbed because we don't know how many tickets we can sell anymore, this is what we thought we could be. So we know we have this. Now it's going to be impacted because this is where we're at now because, we only, for this current fiscal year, we budget 50% capacity in our football stadium, and we'll see where that ends up because we're at with masking and vaccine verifications and all those pieces that impact people coming to games now. But all those things, to me, it's just two simple things in terms of maximizing your being fiscally efficient. It's just having a plan and having the right people to be a part and execute that plan.
Yeah, and if you'll follow your plan and do the right things, more often than not, you're going to end up close to hitting your goals, right? So, so you grew up in Ohio. You went to Ohio State. You spent 15 years there, as we have already alluded to. I saw you quoted in an article one time where you were talking about that's where you were, that's where your friends were, that's where your history was, and you took a leap to move to Florida Atlantic. And there's some folks that they are in the college athletic environment and they're the fan of their school, right? And they get hyped about that school and they want to be there forever. And you and I know that's just not a reality if you're going to advance at any great clip, typically, right? Yeah. And so you made this jump to Florida Atlantic. Talk a little bit about the decision process to say, okay, it's now time to move to something else to advance my career.
So I think there's two. I would guess the most pivotal moment of my career was literally the day Gene Smith walked in the door. And this, having mentored current AD sitting there, when you have someone in that chair that tells you can do it. The reality is I don't look like any other person sitting in the chair, especially at the Power 5 level. Right now, I think me and Vicky Chun are the only two. Me, Vicky Chun, Jamie Boggs, probably identify the most as Grand Canyon, and Vicky at Yale as 3 Asian Americans in leadership roles in Division I sports. But for Gene to plant that seed inside me was one thing, and then to grow that seed by teaching me, holding me accountable, putting me in positions to succeed and to fail, ultimately get you to a place where when someone like that tells you can do it, it really puts some wind in your sails. Now, I will tell you, funny story. Gene also, this is a pretty unique time. I mean, Heather Lyke was there, who's at Pitt, Martin Jarman's there, who's at UCLA now. We got a bunch of other people all across the country in senior level positions. So I remember, Gene started to bring ADs from around the country just to spend time with us. And Ohio State, to your point, was one of those places that if Gene had gotten there in 05 or 06, the last person to leave for an AD role was Paul Krebs in 1998 for like Bowling Green. So it's one of those places people just don't leave. And I would have been categorized as one of those people because it's my home state. I was born and raised in Ohio. Went there. My friends were there. My wife's a grad there. My 3 daughters were born in the hospitals there. So it's one of those types of places. And so when he brought those ADs there, and Chris Del Conte, who's a dear friend, he just pulled. He pulls me aside one day, and he's like, hey, good news and bad news. I was like, what's that? He's like, your job, and I'm Gene's number 2 at that point, and he's telling me, hey, your job's going to prepare you to be the AD at either Texas or Ohio State. And he had been at TCU at this time. And he's like, brother, he's like, you ain't getting either of those jobs from here. He's like, you gotta learn how to drive a tugboat before you get one of the aircraft carriers. And the term he used was, you got to jump off the plank at a certain point. And I knew that, but it was good for someone that is a friend to tell you that. And then the other thing too was I also knew I just needed to get out of my comfort zone. I've always bought into the notion that true growth doesn't happen until you're out of your comfort zone. And I always felt like I profiled for a job in the Mid-American Conference just because of my Ohio roots and Ohio State's unique place. The board of every school in the MAC probably, or the Ohio MAC schools have an Ohio State alum. And Florida Atlantic called, and it was a unique set of circumstances where the president at that time was a former provost at Cleveland State. She got my name from a Ohio State person, and my wife is a warm weather gal at heart, and we took a look at it, and I knew it would get me out of my comfort zone. I'd only lived in Ohio the first 36 years of my life, so yeah. It looked at it as all right. I need to do this. I need to grow. I never left the state of Ohio, and turned into one of the great learning opportunities of my life. And more importantly, it got me to a place like here at Washington State, where we're proud of all the successes that we've been able to have here.
Yeah. So you mentioned Gene, obviously one of the legends in this business, and I was going to ask you a question about what you learned from Gene. So 2 takeaways already from what you just said. One is the believing in people, right, and giving them wings to fly, and candidly, part of that process is you got to hire the right kind of people. So those are 2 things I would say. But what do you try to emulate in your day-to-day job that you took from observing him from the number of years you were with him?
A bunch. I mean, there's not. I mean, he's one of those big figures that has a deep impact on you. But really, it's just if anything, I'd probably say the most important thing is to just go down this path of trying to be a lifelong learner, understanding that leadership is an evolutionary process, not a final destination type process, that people change. This pandemic was one of those times where we all know this, you have to go to your people more, and it's a little bit harder when you can't be with them face to face. And the pandemic hit people differently based on personal circumstances and how it hit them personally. So with Gene, it really is, he's the coolest guy in the room. He's one that if those who have heard him speak publicly, he always talks about emotional intelligence, that EQ is more important than IQ. And that's something I always take to heart. And I think to develop your EQ is really a no finish line type of project. And to develop your EQ really takes constant reading, constant personal reflection, opportunities to get yourself out of your comfort zone, and really trying to figure out, all right, on this given day, what do I need to do to be the best I can be to serve others? And, those are the main takeaways. But I'm fortunate. I'm very fortunate to have Gene, not only to have worked with him for so many years, but still to have a huge impact on me today.
Yeah. So as an athletic director, and we're going to head towards the speed round here in just a second, but I've got one more important question for you. We've talked about constituent groups and the importance of engaging with different constituent groups. And, at least from Mike Hamilton's position, I believe the most important constituent group is your student athletes. What do you do to engage with your student athletes on campus?
I try to be visible. I try to engage. I try to go to as many, now a little bit different during the pandemic and now, because I feel like just because I'm doing a lot with some of my representation on the Pac-12, but pre-pandemic, we're we're one of the families that would have all of our teams over our house certain times a year, just to build some community and get to see them outside of our building. Obviously, I'm one of those, and me and my wife, and I got 3 daughters. We go to as many events as possible. I'll try to sneak into a SAC meeting or a Black Student Athlete Association meeting. The way our building is structured here, our campus is structured, you get a lot of, especially now that students are back on campus, you just get a lot of foot traffic interaction. So the nice thing is I can walk through the hallways, I can walk to my car, I can walk to go see a coach, and you just run into a bunch of student athletes. So the nice thing at Washington State is the geography is built for multiple interaction, but I'm pretty intentional about trying to spend time with them, because at the end of the day, if they are the key to everything. If they're not having a great experience and we're failing miserably, and they're changing at such rapid rates that the more ears, eyes, hands, people that we can to listen and learn and understand what they need, the better off we're all going to be at Washington State.
Yeah. So let's do a little speed round action here and let folks get to know you a little bit better. So you and your wife, Natalie, I think have 3 daughters. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. What do you guys do for fun as a family when you kind of are able to step away from the office?
What do we do for fun as a family? And this became a thing. I didn't know how much we became this because of our time with Florida, but we are a theme park family, I found out. So like one of the first things, so our girls are 16, 14, and 11. And for those, I know you have a bunch of kids, but for those with just daughters, to say you have a vote is kind of like deceiving yourself in a lot of decisions. But when we got out of the pandemic, the first thing the girls wanted to do was go sneak down to Universal and in LA and to Disney. So I think that for whatever reason, that's just one of the things that our family really bonds on, and doing theme park type stuff.
Great. I think sports allegiances are sometimes formed in very early and formative years, and that's a lesson for all of us on campus. But growing up in the state of Ohio, what was the Ohio professional sports team that Pat Chun followed?
Well, I'm a Clevelander, so and I'm an '80s Clevelander, so this is pre-LeBron James, and so there's no winning. But I'm Cleveland Indians, or the Guardians, as they'll be called in the future, and I'll support that. The Cleveland Browns and the Cleveland Cavaliers are my teams growing up.
There you go. For those who don't live in the region, what is the Palouse?
One of the most beautiful stretches of the country that you will ever see. It's a #1 wheat producing county in the country. And it's just the rolling hills create this fertile soil, and that's why farming is just so robust here. So it's one of those things that's pretty breathtaking when you're here. It's a place pretty unique in this country. It's the state of Washington in itself. Someone told me early on, when you make that drive from Pullman to Seattle, you actually see all parts of America the beautiful, amber waves of grain, beautiful mountains, all the way to a robust downtown metropolis like Seattle. So you see all of America really from a drive from Pullman to Seattle.
Yeah. So fans are fans everywhere, but what's the most stark difference in fans between Boca Raton, Florida, and Pullman, Washington?
Well, Boca's a unique place because Boca, I always tell everyone, the one thing we knew about Boca is we probably would not want to live in New York, because everyone in Boca is from New York, New Jersey. So and FAU is a young, up and coming, emerging school, so a very, very different alumni base. Here at Washington State, it feels very Big Ten like. You got a bunch of people, and I mean that in a complimentary way. We got our people come in on Thursdays we're one of the schools, and this predates me, and we've been doing this for decades upon decades. On Thursday night, 5 o'clock, there's a line to get your RVs into our parking lots. Whoever the president at that time was didn't care about taking away parking spots from students on Friday. So that tradition has carried on to this day. So you come in here on a Friday morning, you see all these RVs parked outside, and people here are just loyal and passionate to Washington State at pretty amazing levels. And I think nothing symbolizes that more than that flag on game day. It's kind of who Washington State is. They just showed up. And they kept showing up. And I think years into the show, finally Chris Fowler said something and said, that Washington State flag is here. And they start doing a countdown every week. And that kind of symbolizes Washington State. They come, they stay. They have so much pride in their school that even that flag waver group society that does that, they got people all over the country that are ready to pitch in and hold that flag for 3 hours on a Saturday. And that kind of symbolizes just the loyalty, love, and passion Cougs have for Washington State.
How many years has that been now, Pat? I mean, it's been a long time, right?
Yeah, that's like over, well, it's over 200 some odd shows at this point. It's like 230 some odd shows at this point. It's a pretty cool streak. And even in their opener.
It really is. Yeah, it really is.
And their graphic, you see a graphic of Washington State flag next to their game day logo because it's become a part of the show, which is only a place like Washington State would have alums that would think of that and would do something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Two quick final ones. We've had a pandemic. You may remember that. What have you binge watched anything or read a book during the pandemic that you want to recommend to folks?
Me and my wife caught up on a lot of shows. I like comedies. I'm trying to think. We got into The Righteous Gemstones was probably one of our favorite on HBO. I'm trying to think what else we got into. So I'm a kid of the 80s. The whole Karate Kid reboot is a big hit between me and my wife. So I would probably say Cobra Kai was probably my favorite coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah. All right. Last one, just for fun, because you worked with both the guys. Better Twitter follow, Lane Kiffin or Mike Leach?
Wow, that is a very good question. Two very different ones. Although I do get the sense that Mike Leach has slowed down his Twitter posts of recent months. But a better follow, I would honestly have to give it to Lane, because Lane's got and you know Lane well. I mean, he's got this humor thing that's so quick-witted. He's great. I mean, he's probably the best coach on it because and he's gotten really good at just being funny. It's not mean-spirited. He pokes at his old boss Saban, which is always funny when he does it, but it's in a respectful tone. I'd have to go with Lane on that one. Although Mike Leach is, if his stereotype is the most interesting man alive, it is 100% correct. And I think the deep dark secret with Mike Leach is he is just a very, very wonderful human being and a dear friend as well. So, and
insanely smart, right? I mean, insanely smart.
Yeah, both guys are off the charts with intellect. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's listening. This is already probably follows you, but what's your Twitter handle for those who don't?
It's Pat_Chun, PAT_Chun, CHUN. So please, right now, I'm not one that posts a lot of crazy stuff, but you'll see a lot of positive highlights about Washington State University and our wonderful student athletes on there.
Well, Pat, you've been kind to be with me today. I want to thank you for spending some time, and it's been a good conversation.
All right, Mike, appreciate you doing this. Appreciate all your kind words through the years. You're a friend to many, including myself, and as you know, you're one person that a lot of us look up to just on how you carry yourself and the type of person you are, and just know how much I respect you as a human being, Mike.
Thanks, Pat. So look, you've been listening to From the Chair with Pat Chun, the Director of Athletics at Washington State University. We'll hope you'll go online and listen to this wherever you get your podcast, maybe watch it on YouTube. And I hope you'll join us next time. Again, From the Chair with Mike Hamilton. Have a great day.